Have you ever wondered why people you barely know, or ones who used to ignore each other, suddenly come together just to bring you down? Why your name gets dragged into rooms you've never stepped into? Why your silence triggers storms louder than anything you've said? You're not imagining it. When your light shines without permission, it unsettles those still hiding in the dark. When your truth walks into the room without saying a word, it stirs up everything fake around it. And when insecure people feel exposed, they don't reflect, they react. You're just living your life, not bothering anyone. You walk with peace, mind your own path, and suddenly, people start moving in secret. People who never had anything in common before now bond over one thing: trying to dim your light. Not because you hurt them, but because you reminded them of everything they refused to be. You didn't attack them. You didn't compete. You just existed in truth, and that alone made you a target. They couldn't handle how your presence revealed their masks. They couldn't stand how your strength made their weakness harder to ignore. And instead of leveling up, they teamed up to try and tear you down. Not face to face, but behind your back, with whispers, with gossip, with fake smiles and hidden plans. It wasn't about justice. It wasn't about truth. It was about control, about silencing the one soul that made them feel seen in a way they didn't want to be. But here's what they didn't know. You were never alone. The universe, the divine, your purpose, it all had your back. While they built a trap, you built resilience. While they tried to shake you, you grew stronger. And while they hoped you'd fold, you rose higher than they ever imagined. You didn't fight dirty. You didn't beg for allies. You didn't even clap back. You just kept walking. You let your silence speak. And that silence? It said more than their loudest lies ever could. Because when you're rooted in truth, you don't need to scream to be heard. Your energy does the talking. What they did wasn't random. It wasn't just drama. It was planned. It was quiet. It was calculated. A group of people, some pretending to be kind, others pretending not to care, came together with one goal: to destroy your name. They didn't just gossip, they plotted. They didn't just react, they organized. And still, they failed. That failure wasn't just private, it was public. People saw, even the ones who stayed quiet, even the ones who believed the lies at first. They see it now. They see how you carried yourself with grace, how you kept your head up while others tried to drag your name through the mud. And now, the very crowd they tried to turn against you, they're watching them fall apart. One by one, their stories are cracking. One by one, their masks are slipping. And you're still rising. You were never meant to fit in. You were never built to beg. Every time they tried to bury you, they forgot one thing: seeds grow in silence. And that silence became your sanctuary. That silence became your strength. While they clung to each other out of fear, you stood alone with truth. And that truth made you unshakable. They tried to form an army because facing you one-on-one was never an option. They knew they couldn't win alone, so they built alliances out of insecurity. Broken people bonded over a common target: you. Not because of what you did, but because of what you represent. You stood for everything they refused to grow into. You didn't walk into the room trying to make anyone feel small. But the light you carry made their lies feel tight. Your presence revealed the cracks they were trying to cover, and instead of healing, they went on the attack. That's what happens when the real walks in. Those who are pretending get nervous. They don't sit in silence. They start planning. They don't pray about it. They plot. They don't deal with their triggers. They turn their triggers into a team. But you didn't fold. You didn't fall. You didn't retaliate. Because you were never built for the approval of the crowd. You were built in isolation, in long nights, in hard lessons, in quiet prayers. You were shaped by pain, refined by silence, and made strong through every season they weren't around to see. That's why they couldn't destroy you, because they were never part of what built you. And while they were busy spreading lies, you were building truth. While they tried to cancel your name, you were writing a story no one could erase. They had followers. They had volume, but you had depth. They had each other, but you had purpose. And purpose doesn't panic under pressure. It rises. They thought you would fall without their applause, that you needed their support to shine. But they severely overestimated their importance. Because when they stopped clapping, they thought the show would end. But you were never performing for them in the first place. You weren't looking for attention. You were building legacy. You weren't asking to be accepted. You were following your calling. So when they walked away, they thought you'd shrink, but you expanded. When they turned their backs, they thought it would break you, but it freed you. Now they're scrambling. The people they convinced are asking questions. Their stories aren't lining up. Their fake unity is crumbling. And you're glowing in peace. They wanted to ruin your name, but the universe made sure your truth was louder than their lies. They didn't just fail. They flopped publicly, painfully, completely. Their plan fell apart on full display. They whispered about you like it was truth. They rehearsed a script of betrayal, but the truth kicked the door in. And now, they've become the punchline of their own performance. You didn't need to post proof. You didn't need to fight back. You let life do the talking. And the results spoke louder than any smear campaign ever could. The same ones who laughed at you are now quiet. The same group that once cheered each other on is now falling out. Because fake alliances always turn on themselves once the drama dies. Why did they go so far? Because you became proof that they had no more excuses. You didn't ask for their help. You didn't need their approval. You just kept becoming more of who you are. And that scared them, because it showed what was possible when someone stops pretending and chooses purpose. So let them whisper. Let them team up again. Let them try. It won't matter, because the truth already won, and they know it. Even if they never admit it out loud, they see it in your walk. They feel it in your peace. They hear it in the silence they once mistook for weakness. You were the mirror they couldn't avoid, the reflection they couldn't handle. And no matter how many came together to stop you, they couldn't outlast you, because you were never rooted in popularity. You were rooted in purpose, and purpose doesn't fold. They tried to ruin your name, tried to make others see you as the problem, the drama, the one who needed to be silenced, avoided, blamed. They pointed fingers at you, told stories, created narratives, and turned your silence into something shameful. But now, the truth is revealing itself slowly and powerfully. Now people see that you weren't the villain. You were the story. You were the one who held the real power all along, the one who stood strong in silence while others performed for approval. You were never hiding. You were healing. And now that healing is starting to shine through you in ways no lie can dim. They didn't just fail to destroy you. They exposed themselves in the process. Every attempt to bring you down became a reflection of who they really were. When they dragged your name through the dirt, they didn't realize that dirt was soil. They thought they were burying you, but they were planting you. What they saw as your end was actually the beginning of your growth. While they gossiped, you were growing roots. While they gathered against you, you were quietly becoming. And now, without warning, you've bloomed in front of the very eyes that wanted to see you wilt. They underestimated you. They thought if you didn't fight back, it meant you were defeated. They thought your silence was weakness. They thought because you weren't loud like them, you had no strength. But your silence wasn't empty. It was sacred. It was focused. You were watching, studying, learning, waiting. Not waiting for revenge, but for alignment. Not sharpening your tongue to wound, but sharpening your spirit to detach from anything that wasn't meant for you. You weren't quiet because you had no voice. You were quiet because your soul was protecting something deep, something real, something no one could take, your power. While they were building crowds, you were building character. While they were making noise, you were making peace. While they were trying to win public battles, you were winning private wars. And the truth is, they mistook your restraint for surrender. They thought because you didn't clap back, you had nothing to say. Because you didn't defend yourself, you must have been guilty. But what they couldn't comprehend was that your silence was your strategy. You weren't running away. You were stepping back so God could step in. And now that the dust has settled, they're the ones choking on the stories they used to feed others. You were never afraid. You were calculating. A lion doesn't flinch when hyenas make noise. It waits. It watches. It strikes when the moment is right. That's exactly what you did. You allowed time to do what truth always does, reveal. And the louder they got, the faster they began to crumble under the weight of their own performance. Because real power doesn't announce itself. It doesn't need to prove anything. It simply exists. And when it moves in silence and lets the results do all the talking. They didn't just talk about you. They studied you, watched you, obsessed over your every move. They tried to learn your patterns so they could predict your fall. They took what you shared in vulnerability and turned it into weapons. They twisted your moments of trust into stories of instability. They took your pain and passed it around like gossip, thinking if they told it often enough, it would become truth. They called it concern. They called it love, but it was control. They weren't protecting you. They were preparing your downfall. And even then, you didn't fold. You didn't panic. You didn't try to prove anything. You turned every betrayal into a lesson, every scar into a story, every closed door into redirection. You didn't hide from your past. You used it. You let it teach you how to move, how to guard your peace, how to rebuild with stronger hands and wiser eyes. And while they thought you were breaking, you were being built. While they thought they had access to destroy you, you were learning how to never need them again. This wasn't random. This wasn't just drama or miscommunication. It became a full-blown obsession, a group mindset, a ritual built around tearing you down. And the scariest part is, it worked for a while. People believed them. People joined them. People repeated their lies because it was easier to follow the crowd than to stand up and ask for the truth. You became a target not because of what you did, but because of what you represented. Your presence alone exposed the parts of them they didn't want to face. At first it looked harmless. A few jokes here, a whisper there. But the darkness grew. And suddenly people who never even knew you were preaching about your life like they were experts. They twisted your confidence into arrogance. They turned your boundaries into selfishness. They called your peace coldness. But none of it was real. It was projection, insecurity, jealousy, and it had nothing to do with you. You were just the screen they were projecting their own shadows onto. They didn't just gossip. They worshiped the version of you they made up. They needed to hate you to feel better about staying stuck. They couldn't control your spirit, so they tried to control your story. They created a cult of agreement around lies, and every time your name came up, it was like a ritual, a prayer for your downfall. But the problem with cults built on lies is that they always collapse. Eventually, someone forgets the script. Someone starts asking real questions. And the moment that happens, the whole illusion falls apart. That's what happened. The truth started seeping through. People began to see the gaps, the inconsistencies, the contradictions. And then they started seeing you, not the version they were told to fear, but the real you, the one who never needed to prove anything, the one who rose without clapping back, the one who grew without an audience. And suddenly the lies couldn't survive anymore, because truth doesn't need permission to rise. They saw your light long before you did. That's why they came for you so hard. It was never about what you did. It was about who you were becoming. They knew. They sensed it. Even when you doubted yourself, they didn't. They saw something in you, a strength, a clarity, a calling, and it terrified them. You weren't just another person. You were the one who could change the room just by entering, the one whose silence held more weight than their loudest performances. So they tried to break you early. They tried to kill your confidence before it could take root. They tried to convince you that your light was too much, your dreams too big, your presence too bold. They tried to keep you small because they knew if you ever healed, if you ever saw yourself clearly, you'd be unstoppable. And that's exactly what happened. You healed. You saw. You rose. And everything they feared came true. Now they're tired, bitter, confused, because despite all their effort, you're still here, still glowing, still growing, still chosen. You didn't just survive their plan, you outlived it. You didn't just make it through the fire, you became the fire. And the moment they attacked you, they triggered their own collapse. They didn't know that by targeting you, they were activating the very force they feared. Their failure was written the second they spoke your name with hate. It was never a surprise. It was prophecy. And you didn't just walk through it. You became living proof that grace, silence, and purpose are stronger than hate, lies, and performance. They tried to erase you. But now, your peace is what haunts them. Your joy is what punishes them. Your healing is what silences them, not because you're loud, not because you sought revenge, but because you're still here, breathing, glowing, unbothered. They told stories. You built a life. They screamed. You smiled. They lost sleep over your peace. And you? You're just beginning, because you were never theirs to destroy. You were never under their control. You weren't being judged. They were. You weren't on trial. You were the test. You were the mirror that showed them their own reflection, and they couldn't handle what they saw. And now that the lies have collapsed, all that's left is truth, and you, still standing in it. You didn't just survive. You won. Quietly, completely, forever.